Hey, so I want to talk about... Barry's such a fascinating show. It feels reminiscent of stories we've seen before, but remains entirely unique and unpredictable. At times, maybe even too unpredictable. But nevertheless, a series that kept me enthralled from the pilot to its finale. And that's all you can really ask for in a television show. What makes Barry so exceptional is the compelling and complex characters. Almost everyone in Barry is memorable and serves a precise purpose in the show's storytelling. But in a show filled with compelling characters, one stands out among the rest of them that I find to be the single most important character for the entire story's trajectory. This one character is so significant that the plot would not exist without them. And it probably isn't who you think it is. Not him. Nope. Good guess. Yes! I'm just kidding. I wish. Fine. Let me just tell you. Yes, Albert. The missing piece in the thematic puzzle that Barry so necessarily needed. His very presence alone is the reason why Season 3 remains my favorite in the entire series. I adore James Leal's performance as the former soldier turned detective, and truly, with no exaggeration, Albert's involvement in the story is integral to the entire series. What I mean by that is, without Albert's existence, the chaotic events in Barry would never have even taken place. Let me explain. Albert's introduction into the series is through a flashback when Barry talks about the first time he killed someone. During his first tour while on Firewatch, they spot suspicious activity in the hills of Sanyan. Barry's first instinct is to alert the lieutenant, to which Albert dismisses, telling him with a matter-of-fact tone to take the shot, dude. Barry hesitates, something we don't see from the present-day version of Barry too often. But Albert once again reinforces Barry to go ahead, proclaiming, "You're gonna miss anyway," and to just scare the target. This establishes that killing the person is not even a necessary action. However, Barry pulls the trigger, instantly hitting the person 700 yards away. He has now taken a life, a decision made which can never be undone. The gateway murder that eventually leads Barry down the path we see him go throughout all 4 seasons of the show. And how does Albert respond? With shock and amazement. Barry is rewarded with positive affirmation, something he didn't get a lot of in his life before becoming a soldier. Albert's reaction lit a fuse in Barry that he didn't even know was there. Out of an act of adrenaline, before the other 2 soldiers even fully realize, Barry spots 2 more people in the hills, and without asking permission from anyone, Barry shoots them both. 3 bullets, 3 kills. Albert and the OP's reactions triple in size just like the newly formed body count Barry creates. Unknowingly, Albert is the one who Frankensteins the monster that is Barry. He ignites Barry's murderous ways, willingly and even unwillingly. The later half is in reference to when Albert is shot in the head in Korengal. Barry immediately makes an effort to stop the bleeding and save his friend in peril. He wants to protect him, but to also get revenge for Albert, who is horribly wounded. He spots a man who suspiciously ducks inside a home from his point of view. Berkman draws his weapon, proceeds to enter the house, and unloads multiple rounds into the man, blinded by rage. Though this was not the man who shot his friend, but an innocent man that Barry has now taken the life of. Though his intentions were to seek revenge against the man who harmed his friend, he killed someone who did nothing wrong, inside his own home, in front of his wife. He tells Kusino, "After that, I didn't feel like I deserved a good life." Because Barry didn't think he deserved a life that is good, he chose not to give himself one. He chose to punish himself by taking on a life of killing, which also punishes others. Though Albert didn't inspire this decision made, he is connected to the 2 single reasons why Barry became a hitman. It would have been perfectly acceptable to utilize him only in the past, but this show does something even better that expands upon the narrative exceptionally. In Season 3, Albert is consciously written back into the story, not in the past, but in the present. It is revealed that Albert now works as an FBI special agent bent on solving the case of who murdered Detective Janice Moss. He has matured from the character we saw in the flashbacks, now donning a massive scar across his cheek. Albert has literally changed face. The duality between Albert and Barry is fascinating. Both men have had traumatic experiences while overseas. These two friends who were once very close have grown into completely different people due to the trauma they faced while at war. One becomes a hitman for hire, the other a detective. Complete opposite sides of the spectrum. In the article Understanding Human Behavior in Times of War, Stefan Vetter writes about evil as a shift in cognition. Vetter states, "During times of war, a shift of cognition produces two sets of morals that allow us to judge our enemies differently than our allies and ourselves. We never question this difference. It is seen as inherent in the scheme of reality. It is justice, mythic reality." Barry was unable to break out of this mindset after his time in the military. He didn't get the proper exit he expected, so his mind never changed. He mentally stayed at war. This resulted in something very dangerous when Fuchs meets up with Barry and gives him the proposition to work for him as a contracted killer. Barry, a skilled assassin, didn't hesitate on this opportunity, because he is mentally able to produce two sets of morals. Killing is work. He is doing his job, just like he did overseas. In Barry's life, there are simply people who he kills and doesn't kill. This mindset has affected Barry's ego, because he is paid handsomely to do such an important service that most others in the world cannot provide. He sees himself as more important than most people. He feels he is now above all due to his skill in his profession. He feels safe, which is the one way you cannot feel in this line of work. On the other hand, Albert has evolved into someone who is different than Barry in every single way. The trauma Albert experienced in war created growth. He came back home not a broken man, but a determined man. One who values what it means to live. He appreciates the gift of life, which he wouldn't have still had if Barry never saved him. Gone are the days of celebrating deaths. Now he chooses to protect life. He devotes the life he is lucky enough to live to taking down those who take the lives of others. This leads to Season 3, when Albert is put on the case to find Janice's killer. Way faster than Janice, and even faster than Detective Loach, Albert pieces together that his friend Barry is the one behind the murders of Janice and Chris. Albert manages to track down Berkman and catches him burying a body as if he was just taking out the garbage. In an open valley, Albert yells Berkman's name, catching him by surprise. There is nowhere to run. Barry has never been caught before. He hears Albert's call as if it were an imagination, turning around so suddenly to see his friend standing there in reality. Barry lingers towards him, jaw dropped, eyes squinted as he breathes heavily. He doesn't know if he's in more shock about being caught or that Albert is here. Albert's approach is calm. He doesn't immediately draw his weapon on the murderer, but he speaks to him as a friend. Barry is unable to vocalize anything in the moment. As Albert asks Barry more questions, anger begins to pour out of him when he mentions their mutual friend Chris, who Barry murdered. Barry starts to finally realize what is happening, to which a panic attack ensues. Barry falls to his knees while Albert continues to condemn his actions. Albert questions him. How much did they give you for Chris? Because he was an innocent, Barry. Albert brings up the fact that Chris was innocent as a tactic to relate his murder to the innocent man Barry murdered in his own home back in Korngold. As Barry hyperventilates, Albert continues to ask him, why? Any other officer would have already arrested Barry by now, but Albert's approach is different. This isn't business, actually. It's personal. He demands Barry's reason for killing Chris, to which Barry can't articulate. Albert has had enough and draws his weapon onto Barry. This leads to something after 3 seasons we had never seen. Barry falls onto the ground, maniacally screaming. He is incoherent, not ready for his life to end. He's scared. For the first time in the show's history, Barry has been defeated. For the first time, he tries to beg for his own life. For the first time, he faces death. As Barry continues to cry, Albert tries to speak to this now broken man. The biggest differential between these two is when it comes to their moral code and how they value brotherhood. An article from Oxford University discusses how strongly men at war bond with one another. Each individual was asked to represent their relationship to the group by choosing from a series of pictures that represented different degrees of overlap between themselves and 3 groups: their families, their battalions, and other battalions. Researchers found that 99% of frontline fighters had strong bonds or fused identity with their own family. Albert is strongly in that 99%, where Barry is the minority outlier. Albert would have never killed Chris, because he viewed him as a brother. He knows Barry ended their friend's life, but there is nothing he can do to take revenge. Even though Barry has taken the life of an innocent man, he is still Albert's brother, just like Chris was. He isn't here to get revenge. He is here to help. He is trying to do what he believes is right regardless of Barry's actions. He tells him, "I got a daughter. Her name is Elsie. She's 8 years old. She wouldn't be here if you hadn't saved my life." It is very interesting Albert brings this up. Though it may not mean much in the moment to Barry, it means everything to Albert, just like it will eventually to Barry when he has his son John years later. Albert continues, "I know evil, Barry. You're not evil. But this has to stop. All of it's gotta stop, you hear me? Starting now." Rather than arresting or killing Barry, Albert chooses to see the good that he knows is inside him. He doesn't see a murderer. He sees the man who saved his life. By not killing Barry and letting him go, Albert is now a reason behind John's existence, just as Barry was for Elsie's. As any good friend would, Albert is simply returning the favor. Albert never says thank you, but he shows it with this action. Barry doesn't say one word this entire interaction, but his feelings are clear. The amount of fear and guilt he shows during this entire scene reminds us that our protagonist is still human. Barry left a body behind in that valley. Now Albert does the same. Not one of a dead man, but a broken man. He gives him one last chance, knowing that he has him found out. If Barry chooses to do anything else out of line, that would be it for him. Albert, the man who started Barry down this path, is the one who was forced to stop it. Something that makes the final confrontation between Barry and Albert even more thought-provoking is the tree in the back of the scene. It actually says everything about the 2 men's relationship thus far into the series. I know I may be looking into this too much, but just hear me out. At the very root of Albert and Barry's relationship lies a dead man. The man that Barry killed because Albert gave him the order to do so. I see this as an intentional choice. A relationship sprouted through the death of a man. The tree branches grow above the corpse of another Berkman victim. This plant is old, and it's decaying, just like the friendship between the 2 recently reunited. I see the limbs as possibilities for life after the military. Some grow high like Albert has, some grow down like Chris, and one limb has completely fallen off the tree, as Barry has. A broken man and a broken limb, both full of potential to live a life that is bigger and better than the roots it had sprout from, but to ultimately lie face first in the dirt, detached from life forever. I would have loved to see more of Albert in Season 4, but I find this ending to be completely fulfilling for the character. However, I can't help but think about what possibly went through his head after that day in the valley. I wonder how soon he learned about Berkman's arrest. What did he think when Barry escaped prison? Did he watch the film made about Barry? And how did he feel when he learned that Barry was murdered? Did he think about what he could have done? If Barry's destiny was always a bullet to the head, maybe Albert could have delivered that sooner, saving a lot of other people in the process. But I personally think he is content with his decision. Albert knew he was going into the desert not only to save a friend, but a brother.
Barry Berkman!
Barry.
Barry Berkman!
Barry.
Barry Berkman!
If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you all so much for listening, and let me know in the comments what you think about Albert, Barry, or anything else you want to say. I appreciate you all for visiting The Lost World.